So welcome to Rusty Designs, guys, and welcome to this ABF project in a Mark 1 chassis. This is all I can say, mainly because this one wants to be kept a little bit secret on what car it is. So all you're going to see really, guys, is probably the engine bay, but you are going to kind of make out what it is, maybe with a few other little bits and pieces. But anyway, unfortunately, I've lost a whole load of footage. I've deleted it, I think. So this is going to you're going to start in the future, and then we're going to hopefully jump back into the past a little bit when the car first came to me. There was a whole load of bits missing. This car's been off the road for 13 years. Project's been in the making for 13 years. Unbelievable, really. It came to me with the alternator wasn't sorted out, still had the power steering pump pulley and kind of different kind of brackets. So we've changed up a few bits and pieces here and got a custom belt. For some reason, it's got a TDI crank pulley. It's definitely going to overspeed the alternator at high RPMs, but I've made the person aware. They said that's fine. Also, they kind of got a radiator for it. It was a GTD one for Mark II Golf, and it was kind of pointing downwards and stuff, and it just wasn't going to work at all. So I've actually sourced a Seat 6K one, ABF GTI one, with obviously, because the engine, as you can see with the cover, it is actually a Seat engine, and it came with the pipes as well. The Seat 6K with AC have the pipes going this way around, so it all fits up perfectly, and it's got like a little 1300 fan cowling with a 2-speed fan and a two-speed fan switch fitted onto that, so that's all going to be wired up. There's a whole load of bits missing on this. It came with no pipe, intake pipe, the exhaust manifolds, also the brackets for the manifold were missing. These things were missing, and these are quite, without it, it kind of makes a whole load of resonating noise. It was missing all these bits and pieces on it. Ultimately, it doesn't have a downpipe. I'm not going to be dealing with the exhaust, the garage, because I'm actually doing this on behalf of another garage. They said they're going to sort out the exhaust side of it. Basically, my remit was to actually finish off the coolant pipes, obviously the alternator belt, get the wiring, and get it all started. So that's what I'm doing, as well as they haven't even figured out what to do with the shifter. I told them to go for the O2J setup. Now, this was originally a carburetor car, so we're going to have to sort out some kind of fueling injection system for this and change the piping. Also, as you can see, the ECU is kind of mounted into place. The engine came bare, actually had no wiring, so I've done the wiring harness, tidied it up, had to repair the wiring that goes to the TPS, the throttle position sensor, and the idle switch as well, because they were always burnt out and they were touching as well. So I kind of cut those wires out, rewired it, repaired that. So I can see the wiring's all been taped up, and I've kind of run it along there. It runs around and goes round and then feeds off to go to the ECU up there. Sorry, the air temp is here, and for the O2 sensor, that's on there. Got a new coil. All I've got to do now is actually, from the original coil, is just depin this red and black wire and put it onto that pin location there on this Mark III coil to get RPM for the clocks. Also, I've cut some of the loom. I've modified the loom slightly because we're not going to be going into the fuse box in that same kind of way. We're not going to tap into it. So I just basically just used what was in the engine bay already, which would have been high pressure, low pressure, crank start for the starter motor, and the oil temp. So those are actually kind of the plug there, so you can easily disconnect it if you want to. But yeah, so that kind of goes from the ABF loom, or the engine side of the loom that was kind of integrated into that, goes now into the car loom right here. So we're not messing around touching the fuse box. And then we've got here my little fuse setup and relay setup here that I've done, which is going to kind of go through one of those grommets there. I'm going to have to depin it, but basically, let me just show you guys what we're left with. So we've got the comms wire, the grey and white wire, and this 5-pin plug here, which is going to be the trigger earth from the ECU for the fuel pump relay, injector loom, coils. This is for the idle valve and a few other bits, and I think this is power for the O2 sensor. And then, so I'm going to have to depin that, push the wires through, and then pin it back up again. And what I'll be waiting on the inside of the car will be this here, So that's the male version, and basically what we've got here is coming from the fuse box, and then on the fuel pump side, that kind of just tees off that. So 100% always going to have, even with a short maybe or whatever, you're always going to have power going to that, because then the earth is triggered by the earth side of it, which comes from the ECU. And then we've got main power wire comes up here, use the thick gauge, and it splits off, and that's basically to imitate exactly how the original system would have been. So it kind of comes off there, and one side of it goes to the fuse, 20 amp fuse, that then goes to feed off the fuel pump, and the other side is actually what goes to feed the injectors. So basically, if you get a fuel cut, so basically the ECU cuts this, you lose signal, cuts the fuel pump, but also cuts the injectors at the same time. So that's that side of it done, and then the other side is basically for the auxiliary wires, which is for the idle valve and the O2 sensor. And then actually on this side of the plug, I'm going to use the original coil wiring, so that goes to plug D23. So that'll be tapped into where it would have been going from there. And this red and yellow wire, which will be, what's it, ignition and plus run 12, which is going to go onto, it's going to go onto G here and G. So we're going to use one of these ones which go through a fuse. So probably kind of G2, G3. I think those are probably going to be spare, which would have been oxygen sensor on this carburetor car. I wouldn't have used any of those bits. And it runs off fuse 18, so it's actually, as you can see here, main fuse, run, start power, fuse 18, or we've got this one, fuse 12. So I can see which ones are spare on this wiring block here, G. So it'll either be 2 or 3, which here I actually have a C1 fuse box, and you can see G there. So it's either going to be that location there or that location there. That's 2 and that's 3. And like I said, for the main ones, we'll use power, which is P. We'll use one of these, whichever spare, one of these 2. And then the coil one, which is this thing here, 23 is that third big one there. So I'm going to tap off there, cut off what goes into the engine bay, and then feed that into this. Obviously you get ignition, and that'll be kind of really easy then. And it just runs up as it should. So let me de-pin this and make a hole, push it through the grommet, get some hot glue, seal it up so there's no water going through it, and then do the rest of it that's on the inside. So let me get on with this, and then you'll join me back on the inside of the car when we start wiring up this side of it. There's my relays and fuse for fuel pump relay and ECU and auxiliaries. And there's the plug up there. Hopefully you can see it up there like that. So that's basically ready to go up. But before we do that, let's actually plug the ECU in and check the voltages at the plugs. So I've checked the pins where the earth and power should be, and that's all correct, especially with the diagram. Always double check it. That's how tidy it looks. Looks really quite nice on OEM. So now, moment of truth. Gonna plug the ECU in, and we should get the idle valve actually buzzing. But let me turn off the ignition and disconnect the battery before I do that. All right, that's all plugged in. And now we can connect the battery back up. Moment of truth. Turn the ignition on, and this should be buzzing. We don't have a fuel pump in it yet, so we won't hear that priming, but we should get this idle valve buzzing. Power for the fuel pump has got that far, and it's all wired in now with my relays up there. The only thing left to do will be the comms wire. So now, if I turn the ignition on, is with my little test light here, see what, put the camera down. Okay, so we've got no signal. So now if I turn the ignition off, turn the ignition on, the red light should come on, prime, and then go off if it's all wired up right. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, it does prime the fuel pump. So now that I've done all the wiring side of stuff, now it's to deal with, this was a carburetted car, and yeah, fuel lines. Now these run originally a 6mm line. which could be a bit of a struggle. So upgrade it to a 8mm line. So what I've done is got about 6 meters of fuel pipe, reinforced fuel pipe, and I've kind of run it through. I've removed the original 6mm hard lines, put these in. Now originally it would actually gone around the back of the steering rack and then come through there, but the angle was so tight it was actually literally crimping the fuel hose. So what I did was kind of routed it round that way around in front of it. It won't come nowhere near the exhaust. The exhaust is going to be kind of there like this, kind of come to the side, and that's going to be fine. Also made a 3D bracket here to actually locate it into place here. As you can see, it's not going to move, and I've run it all the way down. Now, this car's been off the road for about 14, 15 years. I've checked in the tank, it's quite rusty, so we're going to order a new tank for this. So I've got to drop the beam on this one. And as you can see, there's the original 6mm lines, or maybe you can't see. Maybe you can see now. So there's the original 6mm lines. So what I'm going to do is going to make a little bracket here as well to put a very small metal fuel filter, and then plumb them in, and then obviously run the new 8mm pipes up to the tank. Now, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mission, but let me crack on. And actually I've removed the rest of the exhaust system that was here. Now, got to drop the rear beam from these 2 bolts here, or nuts, sorry, should I say, right up there and there, and then it can just pivot off the shocks. With the fuel line, the brake lines are probably not going to be big enough, so I'll probably have to take the brake lines off as well. Let me see if I can get away with not removing or touching those brake lines. I'd be quite happy, but let's see.